Going to be taking a look at the Boston Celtics here on the basketball soapbox, their recent road trip, which I thought was going to be the first test of the season for the Boston Celtics, especially looking at those four teams that they were facing on the docket. You had the Minnesota Timberwolves, who with Anthony Edwards always plays us tough, great defensive team. They've had their recent struggles, but they always play us tough. Anthony Edwards usually always has a big game against us. Looking at the Houston Rockets, who are next, looking at how they're number two in the East with their defensive prowess, I thought it was going to be a good test against the Boston Celtics. Jalen Green, Alfred Sengun, that young team going up against us. Moving on to which I really wanted this game, which I'll get into in a minute. The Oklahoma City Thunder, number one in the West. Were number one in the West last season, but have been on a tear this season, even without Chet Holmgren. And just their defensive prowess, I thought it would have been a good matchup. Potential finals preview in that matchup. And moving on to the Denver Nuggets, our last game in the road trip, who just played last night with Nikola Jokic, and they're playing better with Russell Westbrook and Jamal Murray. Those guys are kind of coming together a little bit. And I just thought that would have been a good road trip for us to just cement our footing. And looking at that success, it was a 3-1 road trip, but with a caveat. So I'll get into that. But first, we went up against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Against Anthony Edwards, who always plays this great, but in this game was held to, I believe, 5 for 16 from the field, 2 for 9 from three, and we really took care of business. Build up a lead late in that game, and then Minnesota coming back late in that game to get it close, had an opportunity to tie it, but we ended up pulling out. That was a tough game on the road. Moving on to Houston, where we dominated, had multiple contributions from guys like Luke Cornett and Derek White, picking up a 109-86 win, fairly easy. Dealing with that Houston defense there, which was tough and number 2 in the Western Conference currently. On Sunday against Oklahoma City, not so much fun. In the first half, everything was moving and grooving. And then the OKC Thunder did their best impression, what they did to the Knicks the game before, erasing a 14-point lead against them, erasing a 10-point lead against us, and ended up winning up the game by 13, 105-92. That was disheartening because I really wanted that game, and I thought it was a good measuring stick to see where we are. People want to blame time zones and stuff like that and the flight and getting in. I don't care about that. Overall, the Celtics just didn't match the defensive intensity of the Oklahoma City Thunder, despite even causing more turnovers in the game. That second half, they really just brought it to us, got us out of our sets. Took us out of the game. And looking at, I thought Jaylen Brown missing the 2 previous games, I thought he was going to come in fresh. He had a great first half and then was held scoreless the second half. Jason Tatum really tried to put it on late, but just not enough. They really took us out of our element, pressured us, forced us into situations that we didn't want. And that was a learning experience for the Boston Celtics because similar to that Orlando game on December 23rd, where they just came after us defensively and got up in this and made the game difficult and ended up winning that game. Oklahoma City's able to do that on a different level with a different talent level with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, J-Dub for them, and Isaiah Hartenstein up front really could have given us problems. So that was disheartening to lose that one, but a learning experience nonetheless, I thought. And then we just picked it up in Denver, ended up pulling away late in that game with Jason Tatum dominating in the fourth quarter with 29 points, having 29 points to finish that game. Just looking at that, that was a good win. Denver was going to come out with energy and play hard. We knew that. Just unfortunate that Nikola Jokic wasn't available. And I thought that would have been a good test because Denver has been playing well over the past couple months or so in that stretch. So it would have been a good measuring test to see how we played against Joker and see who former defending champion XYZ, this team that's together. Seeing how they would have played, the Celtics would have played against them, but he wasn't available due to illness, which is going around in the NBA for a lot of reasons. But looking at the Celtics 3-1 in that stretch, but looking at that, I think people are a little worried about the Celtics because they're struggling with their three-point shot and struggling defensively. And looking at the current slump that the Celtics are in, only 35% from three, and that's 17th in the league in the last 4 games. 109 points per game, which is 21st in the league, which you don't think about the Boston Celtics, usually a higher team in the offensive rating there. But this is just over the last 4 games, and we're 112.9 rating defensively, which is in the middle of the league, 15th. So when the shooting's not looking good and the defense is not looking good, and coming out with a 3-1 road trip, I'll take it, and given this point in the season. But I wanted to look at a bigger sample size because there have been grumblings about the Celtics over the past month and people just thinking that the Celtics are getting complacent. There are some truths to, these guys had a long offseason, dealing with all that and coming into the season, bringing everybody back. Multiple guys have been out. 17 out of the last 19 games, the Boston Celtics have not had their top 8 guys. So that means at least one guy has been in and out. I believe Tatum missed a game because of rest. Brown missed a couple games there because of injury. Kristaps Porzingis missed a couple games because of injury. Derek White recently just took a game off. So there's been some mixing and matching, and the Celtics should be good enough to overcome that. But it is something when you're bringing those guys in and out, it kind of changes what they do night to night. So I can understand from that standpoint where there's a little stagnation with the offense there and trying to get guys inserted and comfortable in the rotations and stuff like that. So hopefully the Celtics can get healthy and continue to dominate. But even with that, the Celtics have the third best record in the league. But I wanted to look at some numbers since December 1st, because I feel like that's a good measuring tool where people have been complaining about the Boston Celtics. Before December 1st, the Celtics were 16-3, second in the East behind Cleveland, who has been dominating. But since December 1st until now, current date, January 8th here, they've been 11-7. That's 6 in the league there over the course of that time. Of course, we know about OKC, who has a 15-game winning streak. Since December 1st, they're going to be facing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a 10-game win streak, 14-1 in that stretch. The New York Knicks are 13-5. Memphis is 11-6. Detroit at 500, 9-5 over that stretch. Houston is 10-6. Philadelphia, who I said was, if they're healthy, can produce some wins there, are 10-6 over that stretch. So looking at the Celtics from there, looking at this current slump that they're in, 35.3% from three. That's 20th in the league, and that's not what you want from the Boston Celtics. You want a little bit more efficiency there and getting that uptick. They're 11th in scoring, 115.5, 0.7 points per game over that stretch. And I was surprised by this stat, 46.7 rebounds per game, 5th in the NBA over that stretch. Usually the Celtics aren't doing that. And I believe they're lower in the league in rebounding out of the check. A sore spot here that the Celtics have are their 8.1 steals per game. And I think that's where Joe Mazzulla was trying to get the Celtics to uptick their defensive intensity because of the struggles of the offense and trying to get some easier baskets over that stretch, right? And looking at that, shooting slump that they're in, the percentages aren't as great, and trying to get that defensive up. We have 107 defensive rating, which is top 10 in the league over that stretch as well. So looking at that, I think Joe Mazzulla was looking to create some easy opportunities there as we are last in fast break points, and try to offset that shooting that's been struggling, try to get some easy baskets for the guys. And I think that's something that he's been talking about the past couple games to try to get some turnovers there and get some more defensive intensity on that side of the ball. And I think that's important for the Boston Celtics heading forward, trying to do that, right? And trying to create those opportunities where they are getting those steals and getting back to form until they can find their shot, because obviously they're in a slump. Jason Tatum has been playing well over that stretch. Let me just bring up the steals here. The Celtics are 10th in rebounding, but over that stretch since December 1st are 5th. And when back to the turnover situation with the steals and stuff like that, we saw with OKC what they did to us. They lead the league in steals on that end. Even Philadelphia is up there in steals. The Orlando Magic is up there in steals. The Memphis Grizzlies, the Cleveland Cavaliers are to all top 10 in steals. Houston's right on the outside of 12, but creating some type of steals and getting the opportunity on the fast break is something that is needed in the Boston Celtics. And I think that's a sore spot that they can exploit and get better at that point. And I'm not too worried about the offense. The offense is going to go down a little bit, but it's going to come back up once the guys get healthy and get back in form. That shooting was there the first couple months of the season, so I'm not concerned about that in terms of getting a down tick in shooting right now. But looking at the Boston Celtics this year, and everyone's kind of complaining. They're 17-6 against teams that are over 500, and I know that can be construed a little bit looking at the Eastern Conference and people not thinking of the Eastern Conference as serious, but they are beating teams over 500, and they're 10-4 over teams that are under 500. So maybe there's a little uptick there that they can be better at home. I believe they're 13-6 on the season there, but the Boston Celtics are going to be okay. And I think people are kind of concerned because of the recent slump that they're in. They don't look as dominant. And on night to nights in the NBA, as we know, teams can show up and they can give you some trouble. They can give you some trouble. And I think that's something that the Celtics are running to. I think a lot of teams outside of Cleveland and OKC, who have been on a tear, only losing one game since December 1st, have figured out. New York just lost to Orlando the other night without Franz, without Paulo, without both the Wagner brothers, without Suggs. So looking at it from that standpoint, any team on any night can come in and give and harass you and give you a win and stuff like that. So I think that's something that people have to realize, that the NBA is like that. Teams are going to show up, and when you don't show up on a nightly basis, they can get you at home and away. It happens in the NBA. But just looking at stats from December 1st, looking at Jason Tatum, 27.4 points per game, 10 rebounds a game over that stretch, 5.1 assists. I think he is in the MVP conversation, of course, with his play. People are not going to give him that because SGA, Nikola Jokic, maybe even Donovan Mitchell, I think deserves big consideration. Just because of what Cleveland's doing, he's leading that charge, head in the stake there in Cleveland. But a sore spot for the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, despite having 48% from the field, his shooting is down. Kristaps Porzingis' shooting is down. He's recently returned, putting up 18 and 8 over that span, but his three-point shooting is down a little bit. So when those guys get their shooting back up, I think the Celtics are going to be in better shape, and people are going to start seeing the Celtics for really who they are. And looking at Derek White, who has averaged 20 over the last 3 games that he was available, really upticking his shooting and scoring prowess and doing things. But I think he just needed a rest day the other day. There's some times where he looks fatigued out there sometimes, but he's shooting the ball well. Peyton Pritchard, of course, people are saying he's the leader for Sixth Man of the Year. Obviously, 14 points per game, shooting the ball really well, nearly 40% from there. Drew Holiday, who had a little slump as well, trying to turn it around and do some things. He's always going to fill out that sheet in some regard, right? So I think the Celtics are going to be fine. I think people are complaining a little bit too early, and I know there's concerns when you see Cleveland, who has been on a hot stretch, 10 games in a row, 14-1 in their last 15. You see OKC 15-1, and they're not fully healthy as yet without Chet Holmgren, but that team is still humming on all cylinders with their rotations that they have out there in OKC and the defense they play. People are scared of the New York Knicks because they had a soft spot in their schedule, and whatever it is, they took care of business and got those wins. But I'm not concerned about that. I think the Celtics, if healthy, when healthy, can defeat all those teams. And I think people are getting a little scared and a little up in arms because they want the Celtics to be dominant and look how every other team is looking. But overall, the Celtics are third in the league, record-wise, 27-10. So they're just behind Cleveland, who's 31-4, and the OKC Thunder, who are 30-5. So I think everybody needs to relax and understand what the Celtics are going to turn it around and going to be better once that shooting comes back up. They're 6-4 in their last 10. I know that's not what people want to hear. They want to hear people on more on the side of the New York Knicks, who are 7-3 in that span. They want to be like Cleveland, who's 10-0 in the Eastern Conference. But the Celtics are in good position. And I think people need to realize that the Celtics are going to put it together, and the shooting is going to get better, and the defense is going to pick it up at some point. Just need to stay healthy. And I think that's a big part of it, just keeping guys healthy. And I don't care what other teams are doing, like Orlando or Memphis in that span when they're missing guys and stuff like that. The Celtics need to be healthy overall. And even when they weren't last year, they did pretty good at 64-18 and rattling through most of the playoffs without KP. So we'll see what happens. Looking at the next stretch here of games here, they got Sacramento, they got New Orleans, Toronto, Orlando, Atlanta, and then they hit out the road trip, which is probably another test for us against Golden State on the 20th, MLK Day. You got the Clippers who are playing well. Recently got Kawhi back. The Los Angeles Lakers in LA. That's going to be a big game, of course, always a rivalry game. And then you got Dallas. We don't know the stats of Kyrie and Luka at that point. But yeah, that's probably the next test in a couple weeks ago. Sacramento has been playing well without Mike Brown, surprisingly. And then we got New Orleans, who recently just got Zion back. Toronto, we'll see what they're made of. We'll see if we can get past the scrappy Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks, who have been scrappy this year. So definitely some games on the docket that are going to be interesting for the Boston Celtics. But that first test for the Boston Celtics, although with the caveat because Nikola Jokic didn't play, we're able to be 3-1. So looking at it from that standpoint of the Celtics, I think we're going to be fine. That'll be do it for this episode of the Basketball Soapbox. Until next time, man, we'll talk more sports. I want to get into the Orlando Magic because I think something that they're doing with Jamal Mosley and how feisty they're playing defense, as well as looking at the Pistons. So there's a couple teams I want to talk about, but until next time.